Hi, I'm Chris Lee, and this is Virtually Speaking. Joining me today is Pablos Holman, one of the most renowned hackers in the world, an inspiring technology futurist, and an inventor with over 70 patents. He has a unique view into problem solving and breaking, then building new technologies, talents he's used for more than a decade at the Intellectual Ventures Lab in Seattle, where 150 scientists and engineers are inventing solutions to the world's biggest problems. Pablos' TED Talks have gone viral, totaling over 27 million views. He's spoken for the World Economic Forum at Davos, the United Nations, and many other world-famous events. Pablos has worked on a wide variety of futuristic impact invention projects to solve world-sized problems, including for Bill Gates, a machine to suppress hurricanes and a device that shoots mosquitoes out of the sky with lasers to help eradicate malaria. He also built spaceships with Jeff Bezos, and he invented the first 3D printer to ever print food, as well as helping to create the #1 selling 3D printer in the world, the Makerbot. Today, I'm very excited about the conversation we're gonna have, where we're gonna dive into the innovation mindset for businesses in today's world, as well as discussing powerful technologies, including space travel, artificial intelligence, computational modeling or big data, and how it'll soon help businesses greatly, the blockchain, cryptocurrency, and cybersecurity. Pablos inspires people to create solutions and to invent. So come with me as we take a look at the world through the eyes of a hacker. Well, hello, Pablos Holman. Thank you for joining me on Virtually Speaking. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing as well as can be. Thank you very much here in Los Angeles, and you're up there in Seattle.
Yeah.
How's the weather? It looks sunny.
It's always sunny in Seattle.
Right. My dad literally had a joke. My wife is from Seattle, and he would always tell her and her family, did you know that it rains every single day somewhere in Seattle?
We say that so to keep people from moving here.
Yeah, well, it's a gorgeous city. Gorgeous
Not
city.
working anymore.
So you're in your loft, studio, warehouse, garage, invention place with your Apple IIe. Is that an Apple IIe in the background?
It's an Apple II Plus, which is the predecessor to the Apple IIe. That's the computer I grew up with.
Wow, I had that one too, but I don't think I figured out how to use it as well as you did.
Well, you also had a drum kit, which I didn't have, and so
right.
you know, I didn't have anything to distract me from the computer, unfortunately.
I was just pretending to be cool by learning how to do the drums.
Yeah, that's much cooler. No one thought computers were cool.
Yeah, well, and you worked on building spaceships with Jeff Bezos years ago.
Eventually, yeah. Back in 2001, we started Blue Origin, which is essentially the first privately funded space program in human history.
Wow.
Even before SpaceX and things people have heard more of, I suppose. And yeah, so we were researching, different ways of getting into space, and eventually decided to build a big rocket, and that's what Blue Origin's been doing ever since. And now they have they basically created what's essentially like the fourth rocket technology ever developed for going to space. So they have a really cool rocket that can do vertical takeoff and landing now, and they're trying to figure out how to get humans in space, which is pretty awesome. When humans outgrow the one planet that we're on, which is absolutely the best planet, right? That's why we call it Blue Origin. This is the blue planet. This is the best one to be on. But we're making a lot more humans than we know what to do with. We're not making any more planets. So ultimately, it's a very long-term vision. But if you just try to get your head around what would it be like to have, like 1 trillion humans thriving in space, exploring, developing space colonies, living in other galaxies.
That's what Jeff Bezos wants to accomplish?
Well, in the long run, that's what humans want to accomplish.
Right. The explorers.
We are explorers,
and
that's true in some sense, true for every species. Like, we're wired to want to grow and expand, and perpetuate our species and take it further. And there's no evidence that we're done with that, you
Right.
know? And so, it's certainly a grander ambition and type of vision than most people could ever devote themselves to or even get their head around. But that's really the idea. And if you think about the implications of that, it's a good way to get, I think, to kind of help reframe your mindset, because I think a lot of our problems these days are people very fixated on very short-term problems,
Yeah.
very acute problems. And it makes you depressed and sad and frustrated because a lot of those problems can't be fixed in days or weeks or months or even in one lifetime, But if you start with a vision of, 100 generations from now, my grandkids, all the way down are going to be living on another planet. Well, then what do I got to do to lay the groundwork for that?
Right.
My goal, what would I do in my lifetime to make sure that, this planet can last that long and we can set a course for humanity that goes there. I'm not saying it's the most important thing for everybody, but if you had the opportunity to think on that long time horizon, it's a pretty amazing and wonderful thing for some humans to do.
And even thinking 10 years in advance is a challenge.
But most people can't do it.
But that's something that we've been forced to do with this COVID crisis, is to really fast forward the next 10 years in a short amount of time. And I'm hearing a lot of people talking about that.
More. I think a lot of that really comes from the fact that there's a lot of things we should have been doing for the last 10 years that we just didn't do. And, we could have been doing a better job of preparing ourselves to both prevent this kind of situation and prevent a virus from having such deep effects on the world. But also we could have been preparing for better response, and we just didn't do it. We were busy watching
Did
Netflix.
you see that coming? There's a famous quote that I like to use that I've known about for many years, that really is an appropriate quote for today, by a guy named Kevin Slavin, who I think you know.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people know. And he said, amazing quote, you got to hear this, everyone. Pablos is like a spy. That's this guy, Pablos, is like a spy that we send to our own future to find out what they know and help us catch up. And when you have to pick 5 people to bring with you into a bunker until the fallout subsides, pick Pablos and 4 others just like him. The problem is there's no one else like him. That's Kevin's quote. So we're in the bunker with you now, and the question is, you've been to the future, you know the future. What have you seen, and what are we looking at here with the acceleration of everything right now?
Yeah, I guess the reason he would say that is, there's a lot of different things that you want to be able to do in the chaos.
Right.
Need people who are comfortable with the uncertainty and good at figuring out what's possible instead of just doing what's always been done.
I remember having a conversation with you a couple of years ago about AI.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, everybody's so afraid of AI. Everybody's afraid that AI is going to defeat their business. Yeah. It's going to take over. It's going to get people fired. They're not going to need people anymore. And you actually painted a picture that was much more inspiring with AI.
Right.
That it's a helpful thing. So what technologies do you see out there right now that are underutilized, that are going to be everywhere and a main part of society that really haven't been adopted yet? What is, and also what are you most excited about with those?
I'll give you a great example because, in my mind, if I remember that conversation correctly, you were asking about AI because people are panicking about it. And I was saying, don't even worry about AI. You should worry about pandemics. Because that's the real, and I hope that people are learning right now that it would be much better if you had a robot delivering your food than a human, right? So right now is a good time to reorient your thinking and say, look, robots and automation and artificial intelligence are not the threat. That's not the problem. Those are tools to help us create a future that we want. right? That's our tool.
But we're gonna all get fired. We're all gonna lose our jobs, and there's gonna be automated drivers, and there won't be drivers.
Got fired already,
What?
right? I mean, look around you. Most people's businesses don't operate today, right? You don't have a job. You don't have a career. You don't get to go to work. Most people are not being able to, even if you go to work, you're doing it from home in your pajamas. You're probably not even wearing pants right now. We're just pretending to do our jobs because we're hoping the world goes back to normal. But that's a real problem, right? If we could use these technologies to help us reorient and help us get back on track faster and build a future where a virus can't bring us down, that's much more powerful. And that's what we really need to be thinking about. The truth is, people have been put out of jobs by new technology since the invention of fire, right? And every time we've created more jobs,
right?
So I don't think we're being rational in any way when we look at this problem. We're looking at things like, everybody just, last year everybody was panicking that self-driving cars were going to cause self-driving trucks, and then that would cause 250,000 truck drivers to lose their job. Last year there were 50,000 open truck driver jobs in America.
Really?
Now it's more, right? Those are jobs that we can't fill. 50,000 jobs, that's right. And they started about $50,000 a year. Well, that's not too bad.
Bad job right now to have for a lot of people. Yeah,
it's more than I'm making right now. So I think that we really get ourselves spun up about these very scary stories, and it's easy to get terrified of these dystopian stories, and Hollywood loves to sell them to you because people like to buy scary stories.
And the news likes to sell you the fear as well, of course.
It's all fear.
You actually told me also years ago, which I never forgot. Don't read the news.
Don't read the news. The news is not news. The news is just a dopamine machine that is trying to get you hooked on being terrified every day. And every day gives you something else to be terrified about. Right. Much better, if you want to read news, read the news from 10 years ago. Just go look back 10 years ago at the stuff people were panicking about.
Right.
And it's hard to find an article that will get you spun up, right? Because you'll see that the news that everybody was freaking out about, the election that everybody was freaking out about, the problems they were freaking out about, didn't turn out to be such a big deal. Mm-hmm. Not freaking out about them now. And if that doesn't work, then just look to the future and say, okay, is the stuff I'm freaking out about this week likely to be a big deal next year? Probably not. 10 years? Definitely not. So
what are you most excited about, though? I'm really excited to hear you. The future.
Right, I got that. Okay. So first, let me explain one thing.
Okay, go ahead.
I think this is really important to understand. Okay. And I'll try to be brief. But one of the major tools we use at the lab is computational modeling. Okay. Right. What that means is I can create a simulation of the world or part of the world, or a simulation of a business. Right. Think of a city. That's a simulation of a city. Right. If you had SimCity, then what you could do is run a bunch of experiments. Right. What happens if I put a stoplight here? What happens if I, open up a shopping mall there? What happens if I change the law around parking or increase the rates? Like, you can test all that in SimCity. So we build simulations like that for other things, right? That's how we designed our nuclear reactor. We built a simulation, and we got to model what happens to the neutrons in the reactor core.
You built a nuclear reactor?
At the lab, we invented a new type of nuclear reactor called the TerraPower reactor, which is powered by nuclear waste. It's a modern, safe nuclear reactor that's much more efficient. And it's possible because we have giant supercomputers we can use to test the designs and prove that they're efficient and safe. Okay. Right? We also use the same technology for computational modeling to do disease modeling, to make models spread of disease, largely in the developing world. We were able to do that. So here's an example of the successes. Remember the first Ebola outbreak?
Yes.
12,000 lives were lost.
Okay.
The second Ebola outbreak, only 12 lives were lost, right? That's 3 orders of magnitude improvement in a couple years. Now, we've lost a little ground since then, but the reason it's possible in part is because we were able to use computational models to optimize what are called ring vaccination campaigns. It was a way of containing Ebola before it spread too far.
Right.
Right. We were able to do that using computers. That's possible for everything in the world. It would have been possible to do that with COVID. Imagine how much better the world would be today if we had done that for COVID, contained it early, contained it before it spread out from Wuhan, right? We'd all be enjoying ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? That possibility exists. That requires humans to develop these tools, to use them aggressively, and to develop response mechanisms. You know, that's what we were able to do with Ebola, which is much worse than COVID, right? And we didn't do it here. And so what I'm saying is these technologies didn't exist. This is new for humans in the last 10 or 15 years, right? These supercomputers are massive, incredibly capable, and they're cheap. Anybody can rent them by the minute from Amazon, right? You could have a computational model simulating your business, simulating your industry, right? So imagine what that would mean for almost any industry. And all the listeners, really what that means for you is imagine if you had a simulation of your business in a computer and you could ask it questions. Hey, what would happen if I spent more on marketing? What would happen if I was able to find a source for these materials that was a little cheaper? What would happen if a pandemic shut down my business for a year? You could ask it questions like that. And the computer can tell you what's possible. And it can go and compute all the possible futures and let you choose the one you want.
And anybody can use this technology?
That toolkit exists for humans now, right? These are real. I'm not talking about anything science fiction. I'm not explaining something that requires miraculous inventions. This is what exists today. We've been doing it in the lab for the last 13 years. But the problem is that these sound very complicated and scary, right? This is what we mean when we say big data or data science, computational modeling, all those kinds of things. You know, the big businesses are starting to use them, but we don't have easy tools yet. We don't have Excel for big data, right? And that's what's got to come next. We need to develop tools that make it easier for a guy like you to model your business, right? And once those tools get easier and easier, right now you can do it, you just need to hire data scientists, which are very expensive and hard to get. That's how we do it industrially. But if it's a business, if it's a smaller business or a business like yours or a restaurant or whatever, it's inaccessible. So the computational ability is there and it's cheap, but the know-how isn't there yet for everybody. So as those tools become more and more accessible, which is exactly what's happening right now, the tech industry is trying to make these tools available to everybody, right? And as that happens, what we need to be doing is we need to start doing a better job of simulating our businesses, running all these experiments in software thousands of times before we ever do it in the real world.
But what can the guy who's, and I'm a little confused because you said it was really on Amazon, you could get it's really inexpensive, and then you said it was very inaccessible.
So it's like saying that anybody could go to Sears and buy all the tools to work on their car.
Right.
They still don't know how to do it. Right.
Because you have to enter in all the information the right way. And that part of it is still, we don't have, remember how like TurboTax made it possible for everybody to do tax at home. It's unfathomable to imagine doing your taxes by yourself
but now that TurboTax exists, everybody can.
Right.
So we're talking about, how do we make tools like that for computational modeling? Because it's a superpower that we have. It's a superpower humans have, and we're not using it yet. I'm excited about it because I know that the potential is there, and the way you got to think about it is it's the potential for humans to make better decisions.
Right.
That every problem we're experiencing right now, that you and I are experiencing, it's not because of a virus. It's because of human decision making.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Humans have made the decisions that put us in the situation we're in with our businesses, economically. You can argue back and forth about whether they were the best decisions, but largely a bunch of them were not the best decisions. And the reason is we're using our intuition. Intuition is obsolete for decision making, right? Human brains can't take in enough data.
Right.
And it's caused to make poor decisions that could be better. It used to be the best thing we had was intuition. And it's still amazing what it can do in sports and music and some things. But it's not good for making decisions about what to do in a pandemic. It's not good for making decisions about what to do with your business.
That's very
So we need to be able to ingest all the data. We have sensors for that and everything. We can sense almost anything. We have networks to bring the data back to giant supercomputers, which can run these analytics and these models and help us decide which future do you want.
You're pretty optimistic about the future, right?
I'm absolutely optimistic on a longer time horizon than most people are willing to acknowledge, right? Because even now, even with COVID, even with this pandemic, can you name an actual problem that you and I have?
Oh, besides it?
Well, we don't have COVID, right? We're healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Our families are actually also healthy. We're stuck at home, which isn't our preference, but we're not doing so bad, right?
So you're saying we don't have any problems. COVID exists. We're living. Our business may be down. It's temporary.
Exactly.
It's going to be fine.
Right. And even now, as bad as things are right now, it's better than almost any time in human history.
Well, right. I think it was, who was it that just said, I think it was Buffett, who you actually had lunch with, said, this is actually the best time for any human to be born in the history of the planet.
He's not wrong.
Right.
He's absolutely right. There is no better time.
So many people would argue with you about that because they'd say, look at COVID, look at poverty, look at, all kinds
poverty
of
is at an all-time low. Poverty is not solved.
What screwed everybody up? It was the news, right?
Yeah, the news takes a problem. So here's the thing. We don't have more problems. We don't have more violence. We don't have more poverty. But we
have less of all that.
We have less of all those things, but we have an increased ability to report on it.
Yeah. And to hear about it, where, we didn't know whether it was happening down the street.
You've got a machine in your pocket that tells you about if a kid is kidnapped in Omaha, Nebraska, becomes national news.
Right.
Which is fine, but it's making you feel like, oh, my kids are probably going to be kidnapped.
Right.
It doesn't happen all
Okay, so let's pivot, because you are a hacker, and a lot of people hire you to speak on your favorite topic, cybersecurity.
Right.
And also blockchain continues to emerge, and cryptocurrency is really a hot topic right now. Bitcoin's going up. You worked on, so explain this. You're something called a cypherpunk. I don't mean to offend you, and nobody don't think that I offended him. That's what they called him. Cypherpunks in the 90s were these hacker guys who actually knew that cryptocurrency and the blockchain was coming, and they started doing the work on it. So talk about that and the future of it.
Yeah, so back in those days, what we could see was that, this was like very early for the internet, and the only people on it were extreme computer nerds. Mm-hmm. But we could extrapolate, like, as the network grew and more people got online, you were going to have an increasing set of problems. How would you communicate with people you didn't know in a trusted manner? How would you transact with them in a trusted manner? And we also could see that there were threats to the network. What if somebody tried to take control of it? What if somebody tried to get an asymmetric advantage and decide that I wasn't allowed to do what I wanted on the network? I could only do what they wanted me to do on the network, right? So Cypherpunks was an early community of, fringe wacko nerds who saw these problems early and saw that we could affect them. What we believed was that the toolkit that we could get from cryptography would allow us to architect protocols that would keep anybody from getting an asymmetric advantage on the network, right? The protocols that would embody our values, and in particular, our values were that you shouldn't get to control me and I shouldn't get to control you. And so we put a lot of work into developing different kinds of cryptography-based technologies, protocols that could do that. Some of it was for messaging, being able to send messages online securely. Some of it was for being able to do things anonymously, or in some cases what we call pseudonymously. Some of it was around being able to transact. And so cryptocurrencies started in the 90s, right? The first cryptocurrencies were actually developed back then, but they were missing one really important aspect, which is you need it for a currency. Every currency in human history was created with a centralized mint, right? Somebody, usually a government, issued the currency. And because of that, they have the ability to mess with the value of the currency. That's what's going on right now. Government's printing trillions of dollars. That's going to cause a massive amount of inflation. You can argue about whether that's a good idea or not. But the fact is, you and I are holding dollars and we're beholden to whatever decision they make, right? So the idea with cryptocurrencies was to be able to start to solve some of these problems. What if you could create a currency kind of like gold, where there is no centralized mint, right? Where it has some intrinsic value. It's impossible to just make more or counterfeit currency, right? And it's also impossible to raid the mint, right? And so we had most of the pieces in place up in the 90s, but the one that was missing was the decentralized mint. How do you make a decentralized mint? And that's really what Bitcoin brought for the first time. And there were lots of other cryptocurrencies, different attempts, but what Bitcoin did for the first time was give us the answer to how you make a decentralized mint. And that's what's being done in Bitcoin that's super unique. The blockchain was a way of making a fully decentralized currency. And so, that's why blockchain is basically unstoppable, right? People, obviously some people hate it, governments hate it, but can't shut it down. And the reason is it's a decentralized protocol. There is nothing to attack, right? We can just choose to use it or not on our own as users. And that's a very powerful technology. So a lot of people got inspired by that and started looking at other uses for the blockchain.
Right.
And you can see there's a zillion startups and a zillion cryptocurrencies. A lot of the other cryptocurrencies, some of them are legitimately solving different problems. Like, you want to be able to make a currency that works in a different way than Bitcoin to solve other problems. Like, what happens if I want revocation? What if I want to unroll a transaction? What happens if I want to make a three-party transaction, like with escrow or something? There are all kinds of things you might want to do that Bitcoin isn't suited to do. And that's why things like Ethereum have taken it further. But, and that's all part of the plan. Like we can make as many as we need for different use cases.
But blockchain's also good for making sure that we all know which factory our carton of milk came from, or our medicine came from, or could help.
A better way to think about it, I mean, people are extraordinarily fixated on blockchain, but that's just the newest tool in the toolbox for crypto, right? Crypto has a whole bunch of tools. Now one of them is blockchain, which you should, in your mind, you should just think of as a decentralized database, right? Every other database you know of is in a data center somewhere. That's a central point of attack.
Wouldn't that be great for voting? Or for making sure?
It would be really great for voting, and there are a zillion different projects that make voting on a blockchain and use cryptography to make voting more secure. and all those things. And what's amazing about blockchain is and Bitcoin really is it has attracted an entire generation of coders to the crypto toolkit. It used to just be a few hundred of us. Now it's 100,000. And so that's great because now people are using their creativity and creating all kinds of new protocols that are also decentralized for voting and all kinds of other things. So that's exciting. Unfortunately, most of what you read about cryptocurrency and blockchain is caught up in these sort of Ponzi schemes and this frenzy about trying to get rich because there were a lot of opportunists who made money off of Bitcoin and those things. I don't think that's the important part, and in the long run, it certainly isn't. Well, hopefully, we'll weed those people out as these technologies catch on and we use them for good. But in the meantime, people get excited about it's basically just the same as roulette. Maybe you can buy some Bitcoin and maybe you'll get lucky and maybe you won't.
Right. But companies are using blockchain and they're spending a lot of money on it to use to track their orders and their shipments.
Right, that's right.
Right.
They're using it because the truth is they shouldn't be using it. Blockchain is actually a terrible database technology that's wildly inefficient. But what they should do is be making these shared databases online, right? And so blockchain is one way that you could do that. It brings a bunch of sort of affirmations about your data that aren't really necessary in a lot of contexts. So usually the answer is you don't actually want a blockchain. What you do want is a protocol that allows all the parties to do what they need to do and play fairly. And you can almost always architect a more efficient version of that than you can with a blockchain. But the notion is good, which is, let's go architect protocols. So for example, it's very popular in industries where you have a bunch of different businesses involved in a supply chain. If you're building, a Tesla, well, you've got, batteries coming from one place, tires coming from another place. You're making your own seats. You got wires that are being shipped from Taiwan. You got all this different stuff coming from everywhere. And you need to be able to do things like keep track of, hey, if I want to make 1,000 new Cybertrucks, am I going to be able to get enough tires for them? Well, you want to be able to check a database somewhere that your supplier has enough tires. And if he doesn't have them, you want to be able to see, okay, well, he doesn't have enough tires because he's waiting on getting carbon black from this supplier. You want to be able to see the whole supply chain, but without your competitors saying it. You want to be able to architect these very complicated, transactions, because you can't promise to sell me a Cybertruck until you know that you can get tires for it, and all those different things have to come together. And we've been doing that in less efficient ways in every business. Right? So using a shared database like a blockchain might make it possible to reimagine how you do all that, so that the day I decide, I want to make a Cybertruck version 2, how long is it going to take me to get all the stuff? Well, instead of it taking 9 months to answer that question, you could do it in 9 seconds.
Wow, yeah.
Right? That's how you reimagine a business. And so going back to what I said earlier, we have these extraordinary tools. It's not just blockchain. It's not just, computational modeling. It's not just CRISPR. There's a lot of amazing modern tools that technology is bringing us that we can use as the fundamental building blocks to re-architect our businesses and re-architect our industries. And so, that's the opportunity that exists in almost every business. And the real ramifications of this global reset that we're living through right now is that somebody's going to win. Somebody is going to decide, I'm doing that for my industry. I'm going to take those technologies. I'm going to imagine what it should be like in 10 years, and I'm going to build it today.
Right.
And those are going to be the winners.
Right.
And it's going to be a lot different than what you expect. It's not going to be the incumbents who win, because they usually really suck the worst at the process I just described. Right.
And there's a lot of people who looked at things, 5-10 years ago, like the Ubers.
Yep.
Amazon was longer than 10 years ago, of course.
Yep.
But they not only were they smart and they looked at the industry. I think everybody knows that Uber was planning on getting rid of their drivers anyway and having it all be, autonomous vehicles at some point. That's their end game. But now that gets sped up. It's almost like the COVID thing makes you a little bit lucky if you had adopted some of these technologies because you saw that that's where technology was headed 10 years ago.
There you go.
You're in that position right now. So it's almost like those guys got lucky. So what are we going to do now that 10 years from now we're going to be, and then we'll be lucky in the future? That's
again, like, I'm not going for the I told you so prize, but it's pretty easy to get guys like me to tell you that you should take a look at these technologies, use them as toolkit to reinvent. I've been saying the exact same thing for the last decade and more.
Right.
So if you talked to me a decade ago, I would have told you the same thing. I would have said, look around, what technologies can we use? The reason Uber decimated the taxi industry is because guys like me would go to the taxi companies and say, hey, how about if we make an app so people can call a taxi on the phone? And they wouldn't buy it, right? I'm not joking. Multiple companies tried to go sell an app to taxi companies to order rides, and none of them bought it, right? So they wrote their own history at that point because they were tech averse. They wanted to keep a hold of their monopoly position in each market. They tried to do things the way they'd always done them, and taxis suck. They're like plastic prisons, horrible user experience.
Right, and the same thing happened with Blockbuster and Netflix and Kodak.
Same thing with Blockbuster and Netflix. Same thing with Airbnb and hospitality. Right. I mean, I told the hotel chains they should buy Airbnb when it was still like 6 guys working there.
Wow.
Right? And they wouldn't listen. Right? All this is repeatable. It's repeatable history because when you are and you see this, you've seen me say the same thing in some of the talks I've given, when you're a big successful industry, institution, business, you name it, part of what happens is you just evolve an immune system. And the immune system's job is to suppress risk. The thing that looks most risky is change. Mm-hmm. That's why in Silicon Valley, we don't fix companies. We don't fix businesses. We don't even try. We start from scratch and we look at what you're doing and we make an end run around you, right? We take all the superpowers we got from our technology and we re-architect. We build a new business, a new industry that's built for the future. And that's how we win. And that's why software is eating the world. That's why Uber decimated taxis. That's why Facebook decimated the media industry, right? It's because those industries have that immune system and you can't fight it from within. You got to start from scratch.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, that's a great point. So the COVID moment right now is forcing people to have that viewpoint and to have that opportunity mindset. Yeah. And I imagine that it's probably going to be a very good thing that it happens for some people because they're going to say, if it wasn't for COVID, I never would have developed this, or I never would have looked at that technology.
Right. Exactly. That's going to happen in more businesses and more industries than it ever has before.
Right.
Because reset button isn't just mortgages, it's the planet. It's every business, right? It's everybody in the world. We all have this shared experience. And if you were starting a restaurant today, would you do it the same way? Hell no. Right. So the way to practice is to look at other businesses. Right. It's too hard for your own business because you know it too well. Yeah. You have the immune system for your business. You fighting that. You know everything that can't be done.
Right.
But if you look at other businesses that you don't know as much about, hair salons, restaurants, travel agents, it's really easy to make fun of them. Right. So you just look at their business and say, oh, no way would I ever do that the same. You can start to practice. What would it be like if I were reinventing a restaurant? Just do that and get some practice. Once you've got that practice and you figured out how you would do restaurants, travel agencies, hair salons, then aim at your own business.
Right.
How would I reinvent a speakers bureau? Mm-hmm. Right. How would I reinvent my own business? And maybe you'll be a little better at it. And if you aren't, then call me and I'll help reinvent your business because I don't know anything about
it. One of the industries you are reinventing as we speak is the fashion industry.
Right.
Because you took a look at it. Tell us a little bit about what you saw.
So that one,
what you see coming.
What I saw, I was looking at, years ago, I was working on 3D printing technology.
Right.
We had just, we built, I helped a little bit with Makerbot, which was the first consumer 3D printer, most popular 3D printer ever. And when we sold that company, I got really excited about the idea of manufacturing on demand. What would happen if I could wire up the buy now button to the 3D printer and not have an inventory, not have a warehouse, not have anything except a 3D printer? When you click buy now, I make your stuff and ship it out the next day.
No inventory. That's amazing.
No inventory.
And
that's my vision for how the future of every product should be, right? When I order bike parts, then they should be made that way. When I order a new floppy drive for my Apple II, it should be made that way. When I order a new chair, it should just get printed and sent to me. But we're a long way from being able to do that. 3D printers don't make stuff people want to buy. The technology needs more time to mature. It's getting closer all the time. But I wanted to play with those ideas, and I figured out pretty quickly that the best place to start was the apparel industry. And there are a bunch of reasons for this, but one of them is that, like taxis, like restaurants, they're very tech averse. They've been at it for a long time, and they've collected all the problems. So it's a wildly inefficient industry. I'll give you an example.
It's worse than taxis. It's worse than restaurants because they've got so much inventory, right?
There's only one industry worse than apparel, which is oil.
Yeah.
The apparel industry made 150 billion garments last year. So that's more than 20 for every human.
Wow.
Right? Now, 55% of that stuff is already in landfills.
Landfills.
Or incinerators.
Wow.
Yeah. 30% of it never got sold in the first place. Imagine if the auto industry threw out 30% of the cars they made without ever driving them. That's how bad, and the apparel industry is almost as big. That's how bad this industry is.
Wow. Right? And that's not good for the planet.
It's definitely not good for the planet. It's about 10% of global CO2 emissions is from making clothes.
Whoa.
20% of global freshwater pollution is from making clothes.
Now the computer was just cutting out a little bit, so say that one more time.
20% of all the freshwater pollution in the world is attributable to making clothes.
Wow.
It takes 940 gallons of fresh water to make a pair of jeans.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's 3 years of drinking water for you.
Whoa.
That's not my number, that's Levi's number.
One pair of jeans?
940 gallons of fresh water.
Why? Okay, forget about why.
Exactly why. I'll tell you why. It's because the industry is very stratified. Your brands are not your manufacturers, are not your retailers. Nobody's in a position to capture enough of the value chain to make enough money to spend it on innovation, right? All they do is push the guy below them to cut cost, right? And the fundamental problem is that they're doing what I call speculative manufacturing, right? The product cycle is usually 9 months. Now, sometimes it's a little faster, sometimes it's twice that. That means that you're guessing a year in advance or 9 months in advance what's going to sell, what designs are selling, what colors, what sizes, what volumes. No one ever can guess right. So that means you're going to have something made in Asia. It's going to come back on a boat. You're going to put it in a warehouse. You're going to send it out to retailers and hope somebody finds, oh, I love this color. Do they have my size on the shelf, right? No one guesses right. So that's speculative manufacturing. So if you compare that with my 3D printer and a buy now button,
right?
Now what happens is I'm taking that product cycle down from 9 months, right? The winners in the industry are the guys who got it down to 9 weeks. Zara, H&M. I get it down from 9 weeks to 9 hours, right? And that means I put it through a phase transition where now I'm producing after it's sold instead of before it's sold. That means I guess right every single time. I've never guessed wrong. We've been doing this for 6 years.
That's like In-N-Out versus McDonald's, right?
Say that again?
It's like In-N-Out versus
Yeah,
McDonald's. They make
yeah.
it per order, and then the other people have it already ready to go.
McDonald's is guessing how many Big Macs they can sell in the next hour. They make them so it's ready to go for you. They do less of that these days. That's why you wait longer for a Big Mac than you used to.
But
But basically,
essentially, that's amazing. You're cutting out all of the inventory. You're cutting out all of the shipping, all of the ships,
yeah,
oil, gas, and the pollution, everything.
exactly. I have never made a product for the landfill. I never made something until it was already sold. Every time I did that, I got paid retail for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm about 3 times as profitable as a normal business
Right.
in apparel.
So 10
And so,
years from now, people will be able to literally go on your website and design the shirt that they want with a bigger collar and a different size pocket and a different color and just completely
we can do that now. That's all software.
Yeah.
That's just easy. Most people suck at design, so we don't let them do that, but it works.
But the 3D printers or the printers that you have can cut all the material and put it all together that quickly?
We do. We actually were able to automate every part of our production process except for sewing.
Right.
There are no sewing robots yet.
Yeah.
So I would love to invent them, but it's that those don't exist yet. But all the ways that we colorize fabric, we use digital printing. All the cutting is automated. All the packing and shipping stuff is automated. It's only sewing that we have humans do. So I'm trying to automate the process, and that's just a way to reinvent one of the worst industries in the world, right? And so we're very responsive. Now if a celebrity wears something on Instagram that we made, then we need more. We just start making them more. We don't have to wait for 9 months to get more.
That's great. So that's amazing. So my last question for you is going to be around going back to cybersecurity. These people who hire you to speak on cybersecurity, they have their conversations with you about why their audience is interested in it. What is the most, concerned area that they are asking you to speak about, or what is it that they want you to talk about specifically when they say, come out and speak about cybersecurity? What do they all have in common that they want you to focus on?
I mean, the thing about cybersecurity is very technical, it's very complicated, and very few people have enough knowledge and experience to feel like they can make good decisions related to it.
Okay.
So it's this kind of mythical, scary threat that they can't get their heads around.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually what I'm trying to help them with. I need people to have a greater sense of comfort, because the truth is, all these computers and all this technology, our job is to try it, take on the risk early at a small scale, figure out which of them are good, which technologies are good, which are helping, which ones suck and aren't, get rid of those, and double down on the ones that are good, right? So we need a process like that. And if we have companies that are terrified, they're paralyzed by fear, then they won't adopt these technologies. And we see that in a lot of industries, right? So what I'm trying to do is help people get comfortable with the fact that cybersecurity is one of the risks we got to handle, right? There are steps we can do, that we can take to make sure that we're not the low-hanging fruit, that we're not exposing ourselves to more risk than necessary, right? Help them understand that, help them see that this is a risk management problem, and we've done that type of thing before. We've managed risk in other areas in the business. We need to manage it here as well, because we really need allies for adopting new technology in order to advance these businesses. We can't have them paralyzed by fear. So a lot of times I'm just trying to demystify how this process works, demystify the technology, demystify the what hackers are up to, what they're doing, what is they're actually capable of, how that works, and show a little bit about what on the defense side. Here's what we do about it. Here's how to think about it. Here's how we're gonna, turn this into a risk management game that we can play versus some all-encompassing, panic-stricken monster that's coming after us or something.
What's the number one game that hackers are playing right now, as far as what's the thing that they're the most? I mean,
a lot of what's happening is, you got to think of as opportunistic fraud, right? They're just trying to find a way to suck money out of the system without getting caught, just like any criminal. So they just have a couple of advantages over historic criminals. You can do it from your bedroom in Romania or some other place where you might not get caught or might not get in a lot of trouble if you did. So there's those kinds of things. A lot of the motivation, you got to remember, maps to people with that are in poor economic conditions and are highly educated or technically educated, right? So we had a lot of problems with Eastern European hackers in some places in Asia and now the Middle East, where they're getting a lot of expertise with these technologies. But there's no, like any kid in America who knows about cybersecurity or anything to do with hacking can get a 6-figure job configuring firewalls for a Fortune 500 company. Like that's, we have economic opportunities if you know these skills, but that's not true everywhere in the world. And so that's really who is creating the noise floor of cybersecurity problems. On top of that, you've got more sophisticated hackers that are targeted. They're going after a specific company and specific industry. They're trying to get specific things that they can trade on and capitalize on. And that's that's a little scarier, and that's why those companies that are valuable have more to protect, and they have to spend more to do a good job of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, is there anything you want to say to wrap up and leave us with thoughts?
I guess I think we covered a lot of the things that I like to talk about and my perspectives on things. But I really think people would probably be better off not watching the news, finding something to build. And I hope that, with this pandemic, we come out of it stronger because people learn that they get to vote with their attention. The vote you cast in election probably doesn't matter, but the vote you cast with your time and attention and your dollars matters, So, spend your time learning to do a good job with that. There's a lot of, and then choose who your influences are. I think that people made really poor choices about who they use as influences, right? And a lot of times just who's famous, who's saying the most bombastic things, who's the best at playing sports ball. That's probably not going to get you the results you want. Try to find the people who are thoughtful, who are smart, who you respect for their intelligence. Try to understand their thought processes.
Try to learn, right? Try to grow.
And then I would say, like a good example of how to get that in your head is there's an extraordinary book by an amazing guy named Hans Rosling, who we unfortunately lost last year. He died last year. But his last book is called Factfulness. And it's a way to train yourself how to make better decisions, how to learn the difference between, a fact and someone's opinion. And it's really accessible. Like high school kids can read it, and I think they should. So that's a good way of learning a different thought process. And I think it's just, now's your chance. Like this is the moment to reset personally with your business. Like go think about how am I going to become somebody who contributes to the future we have to build now? You can be a spectator, you can stay home, you can panic, you can go crazy, you can die of COVID if you want. That's all your prerogative. But right now, we need allies. Like we need people to help us build a better future. And the opportunity exists. We're going to build some future, whether we like it or not. Might as well be a better one. So that's how I hope people will.
That's amazing. Very well said, my friend. Really great having this conversation with you. Thank you so much for doing it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much, Chris. And I'm looking forward to getting to do a lot of fun stuff together.
Yeah, it's going to be, the future is bright. And thanks to people like you. So thank you so much, buddy.
All right. Thanks, you guys.
All right. Bye. Take care. Bye.